Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Cartels? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamunatira Vanajari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Oh, Jasodanandana Brajajana Ranjana. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jamunatira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Sri Radha Madhava ki, Sri Radha Giridhari ki jai, Gantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Purivrajaka Jaja Shudra Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace of Charanad Avinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Purivrajaka Jaja Shudra Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki jai. Nanta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Sam Veda Bhakti Nivi ki jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories assembled devotees. All glories, Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Starting with 21. Okay. Did I say something wrong? He just ran out. I didn't start it yet and he ran out. Who's next? Okay. Happens every Tuesday. I don't know if it's the day or it's me. I don't know what's going on. Okay. Can we open that door a little bit? Just let some air in here. Okay, we're starting with text 21. We'll read a few verses today. This is Maharaj Chittaketu speaking to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yes?
I think he's still giving him the prayer. I'm not sure.
Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Vachasi Uparate Aprapya Yaha Eka Manasa Saha Anama Rupas Chinmatra Sovyan Na Sarasat Paraha Vachasyupaprate Prapya Yaiko Manasa Saha Anama Rupas Chinmatra Sovyana Sarasat Paraha Vachasyuparate Prapya Yaiko Manasa Saha Anamarupas Chinmatra Sovyana Sarasat Paraha Vachasyuparate Prapya Yaiko Manasa Saha Anamarupas Chinmatra Sovyana Sarasat Paraha. Anyone like to chant? Ladies? Vachasyuparate Prapya
Yaiko Manashashaha
Anamarupaschinmatra
Amarupaschinamatra
Sovyannam
Sarvasatparaha.
Synonyms. Vachasi. When the words uparate, cease, aprapya, not achieving the goal, yaha, he who, ekaha, one without a second, manasa, the mind, saha, with, anama, with no material name, rupaha, or material form, chitmatra, totally spiritual, saha, he, of yat, may kindly protect, naha, us, sarasat paraha, who is the cause of all causes, the supreme cause. Translation, purport, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. The words and mind of the conditioned soul cannot approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For material names and forms are not applicable to the Lord, who is entirely spiritual beyond the conception of gross and subtle forms. The impersonal Brahman is another of his forms. May he, by his pleasure, protect us. Purport. The impersonal Brahman, which is the effulgence of the Lord, is described in this verse. I just was listening to excellent recording by His Grace Dravida Prabhu. It's the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam and the chapter on the prayers by personified Vedas, apparently answering this question. Maharaj Parikshit asked the question, then it goes into telling different Narada Muni had seen Narayan Rishi and this and that, and this question that we have material mind and senses, how can we understand the transcendental nature of the Lord? So for class today, I'm going to read the whole chapter to you. Yeah. But if you want further, very nice elucidation on this question and an answer, that's the chapter to read in the Krishna book or 10th canto. So we're going on to text 22. Translation, as pots made completely of earth are situated on earth after being created and are transformed into earth again when broken, this cosmic manifestation is caused by the Supreme Brahman, situated in the Supreme Brahman and annihilated in the same Supreme Brahman. Therefore, since the Supreme Lord is the cause of Brahman, let us offer him our respectful obeisances. Another long purport. The Supreme Lord is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. He maintains it after creation and after annihilation. The Lord is the reservoir of everything. Text 23, translation. The Supreme Brahman emanates from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and expands like the sky. Although untouched by anything material, it exists within and without. Nonetheless, the mind, intelligence, senses, and living force can neither touch him nor know him. I offer him my respectful obeisances. Text 24. This is the one, the purport. Read. Translation. As iron has the power to burn when made red hot in the association of fire, so the body, senses, living force, mind, and intelligence, although merely lumps of matter, can function in their activities when infused with a particle of consciousness by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As iron cannot burn unless heated by fire, the bodily senses cannot act unless favored by the Supreme Brahman. Purport. Red-hot iron can burn, but it cannot burn the original fire. Therefore, the consciousness of the small particle of Brahman is fully dependent on the power of the Supreme Brahman. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says, Mattakshmitir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. Does anyone remember that verse? Because it says right here, by Krishna's grace you can remember it. Has anyone forgotten the verse? That's by Krishna's arrangement also. Shmitir Jnanam Apohanam Cha. From me, the conditioned soul receives memory, knowledge, and forgetfulness. The power for activities comes from the Supreme Lord, and when the Lord withdraws this power, the conditioned soul no longer has energy with which to act through his various senses. You'll experience as you get older, Krishna starts removing that energy, right? The body includes 5 knowledge-acquiring senses, 5 active senses, and the mind, but actually, these are merely lumps of matter. For example, the brain is nothing but matter. But when electrified by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the brain can act, just as iron can burn when made red hot by the influence of fire. The brain can act while we are awake or even while we're dreaming. But when we are fast asleep or unconscious, the brain is inactive. Since the brain is a lump of matter, it does not have independent power with which to act. It can act only when favored by the influence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is Brahman or Parabrahman. This is the way to understand how the Supreme Brahman, Krishna, is present everywhere. Just as the sunshine is present because of the sun god in the sun globe. The Supreme Lord is called Hrishikesh. He is the only conductor of the senses. Unless empowered by his energy, our senses cannot act. In other words, he is the only seer, the only worker, the only listener, and the only active principle or supreme controller. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Agyanti Brandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshuran Minitam Dena Taismai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Dena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Svabadandikam. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So by your kind wishes, I'll try to say a few words. So today is July 4th. Besides the population of this country becoming more enthusiastic to ruin their lives in various ways, what does it represent? Right? It's a political day, right? Our independence, like that. So it's a good verse because it's explaining how we're completely dependent. So it's a good verse because it's an illusion, the idea of independence. Except for Krishna, he's known as Swarat. He's completely independent. Who's Krishna dependent on? He makes himself dependent on his devotees, but actually he's completely independent, and everything else is dependent upon him. That's the tattva. So, some different things are brought up by Srila Prabhupada here about the red iron rod that becomes red and it can be burned, but only if it's in touch with the fire. Okay, we'll just talk about, we may go back to some of the previous verses. So in the exact same way, it gives an analogy, so in the exact same way, all our body, our senses, everything, the mind, the subtle body, gross body, they're only functioning because of the presence of the soul and the supersoul. Because if you think about it, the soul, us, we come from the spiritual world, tiny particle of spiritual energy, and we don't really know what to do, how to do anything. You know, we've come into the material world, someone's helping us, and that's the Antaryami, that's the Paramatma. In the material world, Krishna is right next to us as Paramatma. In the spiritual world, he's right next to us externally, right in front of us. Krishna's there, Vishnu. But in the material world, we don't see him externally. He's there internally. He's our best friend. Someone's got to help us out. Because we don't have any idea how to do anything. Just like Lord Brahma, he wanted to create a universe, and Krishna had to, Tene Brahma Hrida, from within his heart, give him all that potency and information how to create a universe. So, and big or small, the tape the other day, Prabhupada was talking about the ants, you know. Prabhupada said the ants, Krishna in the heart lets him know, on the 10th floor there's a grain of sugar. Prabhupada said, on the 10th floor there's a grain of sugar. So, and then the ant goes all the way up there and gets the sugar. So how'd that ant know to go all the way up to the 10th floor? Because Krishna's in the heart, Paramatma. Hey, there's a grain of sugar on the 10th floor. That's Paramatma. Like that. Actually, I was talking about how ants like to be intoxicated. They love to be intoxicated. The sugar makes them intoxicated. Like, do you wonder why they go so fast? They're on something. That's what it is. They're on something. It's called sugar. Whew, right? Like little kids are like that too, right? Give a kid enough ice cream and cake at a birthday party, you got a problem. Whole room full of kids just bouncing off the wall. So just like ants, too much sugar, and they're just moving like anything. So that's Krishna in the heart saying, there's a grain of sugar on the 10th floor. So otherwise, how would we know? So every single function for us, in every movement of the material energy, there's a conscious person behind it. The soul is there and super soul is there, actually. There's two. And otherwise, nothing is going to move. It's interesting, Prabhupada talks about the brain. When I read this, I thought, they have Einstein's brain in a bottle. You know that? They kept his brain in a bottle because they want to know what made him so intelligent. It's kind of interesting, though. Sariputta gave a class once, and he goes, Einstein really wasn't that intelligent. It's kind of mythical. He's got a mythical level of notoriety, but he wasn't that, what he said and so on wasn't that, special. But, special wasn't that special. That's what Sariputta said. But they, after he passed away, they figure, well, wow, it's mythological. Because if you do something, someone says, what is that saying? You don't have to be Einstein or something like that. There's some saying about Einstein, right? If you do something, what is it? You know all these things. What is that? Wake up. He knows. Yeah, come on, you've heard that expression before, Oh, you think you're Einstein or something, huh? Yeah, Einstein. You're so smart. It's in the vocabulary, in the culture. So they took his brain, and I don't know where it is. I think it's some Midwestern university. And every once in a while, they take a little piece of it, and they're trying to, under microscopes and different things to figure out, what his brain, Because, physically, did you know that previously they thought the bigger the brain you had, the smarter you were? Right? Prabhupada, huh? No. It's not true now. Who knows? It could be true in the future. But when Prabhupada went to school, that was the idea. The bigger the brain, and men have bigger brains than women have. So, they must be more intelligent. So, but actually the smallest brain on record is some philosopher. Very, very brilliant person, a very small brain. It has to do with the, what do they call it, all those little grooves and, synapses, the connections. No, but the crevices in the brain. Okay. That's one observation. The more of those you got, the smarter you are. But no matter how many synapses, nothing's going to synap, and nothing's going to happen unless the soul's there. Right? You can have all the grooves in your brain you want, but if there's no soul in the body, it's not helping anyone. Right? Just like you can build a very, very, what's a very, very fast car?
The new Tesla.
Man, come on. Where's your, some kind of sports car or something? Maserati. Okay, now we're talking. What? Ferrari, Maserati. Now we're talking. Okay. Huh? A Mustang. Okay, here's a man. Here's a man from Colorado. Okay. Okay, sports car. Okay. They got some really fancy sports cars out there. What are those ones? Corvettes? Low to the ground? Okay. So you can build, is it really that funny? Should I tone it down? No, it's a good example. You could have, some of these cars. Who was it just said that? Jayadvaita Maharaj. He said he has a friend in a Middle Eastern country who works for one of these very, very, I don't know if it's a sheikh or just a businessman. In his job as a secretary, he oversees all of his cars. That's his only job. The man has so much money, he has so many cars. Like, what's his name, that comedian? Just cars and cars and cars. So they got some very expensive cars. In fact, now that Jay Leno, some of those cars you can't even insure. They're so expensive. So you can imagine super duper 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 sports car, but if it's just sitting in the garage, who cares? You know, going from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds and this and that and all the different features, they mean nothing unless Bhakti J is in that car driving it somewhere. Doesn't mean a thing, right? So it doesn't matter what the body is, you know, how strong you are, how intelligent you are, or any of these things are not activated unless the soul is there. That's the point here. It's being the point made. And it's an unfortunate and an unintelligent idea that matter has the ability to self-organize itself. When have we ever had any experience of that? Right? Does a Sunday fish just cook itself? The deities dress them. Well, the deities dress themselves. That's not an example. Does the temple floor get cleaned by clean itself, or you know, these things just don't happen. Matter just doesn't organize itself. It falls apart. It's called the law of entropy. It just falls apart. Matter just falls apart. So, some or other, today's popular explanation for what's going on is somehow matter has organized itself over millions of years, and this is what we got. Of course, people could complain that it's done a very good job, right? It hasn't done a very good job of organizing itself. But Prabhupada's making the point here. And it's not just the soul, it's really the super soul. At the very end, Prabhupada says, he is the only conductor of the senses. In other words, he's the only seer, the only worker, the only listener, the only active principle, or the supreme controller. Krishna is keeping it all together. In other words, we're completely dependent upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We're completely dependent. And to reflect on that is extremely important. And that's why the devotees are praying, just like here. Previous verses asking, you know, for some mercy, some kindness, offering respectful obeisances, what was this? By his pleasure, protect us, over and over again, understanding that Krishna, you are the supreme controller, by your mercy, and Krishna's mercy comes in different avenues. Just like the ability to advance in spiritual life, who's responsible for that? Who manifests that, though? Yes, right. The Guru and the Vaishnavas. By their grace, we advance in Krishna consciousness. So Krishna's grace for that movement, that's where it's coming. That's why the devotees are offered all respect, because they are carrying the Supreme Personality of Godhead in this world, delivering the Supreme Personality of Godhead to all the conditioned souls. Krishna wanted to enjoy that pastime also, so he came as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Was so ecstatic. He came as a devotee just to experience the ecstasy of distributing Krishna consciousness. It's so wonderful. So the Guru and the Vaishnavas, they're the ones who empower us. We're dependent upon their kindness. What did you sing this morning? What was the verse number 8? Yeah. Yasya pasada, bhagavat pasada, yasya pasadam na kati kutopi. I was telling Sampada the other day, na kati kutopi. When I joined in Boston, back in the good old days, this is the good days too, but we had no songbooks. Remember that? There's no songbooks whatsoever. Nothing. And this one devotee, Sadashiva, he thought Nagati Katopi was gotta get a gopi. It sounded right. He'd be saying, gotta get a gopi. There's no songbook, and so someone, temple president, said, I don't think that's it. Because, you know, when we had Bhakti program, you had a sheet, you start learning the songs in the Sanskrit and English, but back then you didn't have that, nothing. I mean, the song, you know, that first songbook was like 74 or something, right? 74. Yeah, that's when we saw it. So, and you finally started getting around, but he thought it was not, got to get a gopi. Nagati katopi. You know, without the mercy of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. You know, so that's the point.
I heard a lot of devotees, certain devotees who
Guru Vashtaka before there were songbooks. Nakunjayu no Ratikeli Sidya Yayayu beer. Yayayu beer, and they would always sing that. And where does that come from? Someone typed the wrong letter. You see, if you look at the type, instead of the Yayali beer, it became Yayayu beer, and they stuck with that. That's the way it was. Mm-hmm. Until we get,
Get it corrected. Okay. So it goes beyond just modern Kali Yuga and so on, but the basic disease of material existence is I'm independent. Right? That I'm independent. And of course it becomes more and more intense and accentuated as Kali Yuga goes on for some crazy reason. Even though things get worse and worse and worse and worse, somehow or other, that's just the consciousness of the jiva. Now, to become dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead doesn't mean one is no longer dynamic and acting. Actually, that increases. One understands they're completely... because if you're thinking someone's... actually, where's that line? The very... one's longevity and so on, become depleted. One becomes over-dependent on another's mercy. That's a line in the Bhagavatam, right? Our longevity, all these different things, over-dependence on another's mercy. In other words, it becomes over-dependent on another person. That's not good, especially in Kali Yuga, or any time, especially that person's not really helping you. So if you become overly dependent on another, you're in a difficult situation. But we're supposed to be 100% dependent on Krishna, so what's that all about? Right? Are we in a dangerous position? No, because that's the actual situation. That's actually what's going on. It's just a matter of accepting the reality. When we talk about the word surrender, actually, surrender simply means to accept the reality. That's all. That's all. It's not like you're giving up any independence. You're giving up a false idea of independence. I guess that's like if someone has a gun to your head and says surrender, you're giving up a false sense of independence because they got a gun right to your head and they're telling you to surrender. But Krishna doesn't have a gun to her head. But the point is we're completely dependent on the Lord. Just to raise your arm. Raise your arm. Right, see? When you think, I can just raise my arm. But there are people who can't raise their arm. Like that. Or sometimes, you ever have your limbs fall asleep? Your feet? Okay. And you go to stand up and you make a whole scene and everyone wonders what's going on, or you sleep on your arm and then you realize it's like that, just like nothing. So. Breathing, yes. So Krishna gives us enough rope, or so-called freedom, because the material world is existing for two purposes. One is to give the jiva an opportunity to try to enjoy. Just like you try to convince someone to do something and they just won't listen, okay, you go ahead. Right? Go ahead. See what happens. So it's kind of like that. Material world is like, go ahead. What are you going to learn? Oh, let me touch the fire. What's the child going to learn? He's not going to go, it's cold. No, not going to learn that at all. It's going to hurt. But if you won't listen, go ahead. So the material world, why do we have enough rope to hang ourselves here? Why? Because Krishna's giving us that because we won't listen to good advice. So go ahead, try. Like that. And he's always watching though, just like parents, go ahead, but the parent's not going to let the child hurt themselves. So Krishna actually doesn't let the jiva get hurt. Did you know that? Whatever's going on, the so-called pain of this material world actually doesn't touch the soul. If you think about it, it doesn't touch the soul. Krishna's not allowing any soul to really suffer here. Not really suffering at all. It's the material nature acting, but the soul is completely insulated from the whole thing. But it's what is that? Put those things on. And you have a alternate reality. Virtual. It's a virtual reality for the soul. That's what's going on. But Krishna doesn't let the soul get hurt. It doesn't get hurt by the material energy. It's a virtual reality to learn a lesson. So that's one part of it. And the other part is for us to wake up. But then the waking up is, oh yes, Krishna is doing everything. He's doing everything here. He's doing everything in the spiritual world. He's doing everything. Why? For enjoyment. For he and all the living entities to enjoy. Right? That's what's actually going on. That's what's going on. So, and therefore the devotees are very, very peaceful and happy because they have that realization. Just like a little child has the realization, my mom and dad are just taking care of everything. When they have that feeling, they're just quite content, like not worried at all. Mom and dad are taking care of everything. You want to hear a little story I heard yesterday at a puja about how important mom and dad is? Yeah. You want to hear this story? It's an interesting story. This gentleman said he just heard it on YouTube from some Veda. But you know how important mom and dad is. Okay. So, anyways, a sadhu yogi come to the village, and immediately when he came to the village, he was approached that there was a man with a horrible, life-threatening disease, and he's going about ready to die. And is there anything you can do to help this person? And the sadhu looked at him and said, yes, if you bring me soil from heaven, I can cure this man. So everyone's looking at each other like, okay, and then this little boy was there, and he heard what he said, and he ran away. And then he ran back, and he had a handful of soil. And he gave it to the sadhu. And the sadhu took it and chanted his mantras and all that, and brought the person pretty much back from death. And so everyone's kind of gathered around like, what was that all about? And where does this little boy get soil from heaven? And so the sadhu said, where did you get that soil? He said, oh, I ran home. And my mom and dad were standing there, and I just took the dirt from underneath their feet, and I brought it to you. It's a nice story, isn't it? Mom and dad. The soil under their feet, nice, like that. Nice, like that. That's where you get it from. So that's a story he told. I thought it was pretty good. It's a story, and I just told it. But whether it's in the Vedas, I don't know. But it's a good story to understand the value of mom and dad, offering them all respects, and that combination, a good mom and dad, the soil they walk on for the children, especially, just like heaven, like that. So, again, just these verses, a lot to do with the idea of, the reality that we're not independent. If we were, why are we such a mess? Right? That's the big question. Why are we in such a mess? No, we're completely dependent upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that dependence is the greatest happiness. Is the greatest happiness. So the more we come in tune with that and give up the idea of being independent and not needing Krishna's presence eternally, 24/7, the more and more one feels the presence of the Supreme Personality of God. And Prabhupada says right here, that's how you do it, right? He just said here, is it in this purport? One way to understand the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or to see Him everywhere, is this is how you do it. This is how you do it. To always understand our dependence upon the Lord. And devotees are always praying for that kindness and mercy, like that. So we can end here. There may be some more discussion or questions. Everyone feels pretty self-satisfied.
I have a small question about being...
You want a small answer?
Yeah, that's fine too. About being dependent on Krishna. Sometimes we feel like we're, we have that understanding, realization that we're dependent on Krishna, but in time we might kind of forget and slip away from that, and we think that I'm actually doing this, I'm chanting, or I'm doing, certain things. So how do we maintain consciously always being dependent on Krishna and not fall into that trap?
Okay, as far as remembering things, there's two ways. One is by constant hearing, good association and hearing. And that doesn't work, there's what's called suffering. Okay? Because you may experience this thing as Sankirtan devotee, but any kind of service, whatever if we forget that, Krishna helps us remember it. Right? We think we're independent, we're in control. Krishna very mercifully gives us a good lesson that that's not true. It's not true at all. So, and from many different angles, Krishna is working with us like that to get us on the proper track, and if we go off, to get us back on. So, it's what do they say? An intelligent person learns by hearing. A fool learns by. I'm not picking on you. Do you just know the answer? Do you know the answer? You don't know the answer to that one? Okay, what's the answer? By bitter experience. That's the saying. A fool learns by bitter experience. So, Prabhu?
I just want to point out the appropriateness of this verse and purport for this day. It's all about dependence, complete dependence.
Yes. Isn't
that what this is? This is Dependence Day?
Yes.
And they were celebrating it out there? Illusion of independence.
Do you have any questions, Bhaskar? What do you think of the class? I'm kidding, I'm picking on you. Did you have another? So? Yeah.
So, for the translation of the verse that we're dealing with today, I don't see this idea in the synonyms or the purport.
Yes.
So it finishes by saying the impersonal Brahman is another form of his form. Okay. The impersonal Brahman is another of his forms. May he, by his pleasure, protect us. So this notion of by his pleasure, that's not in the synonyms or purport. So I'm wondering, why do they say it that way? By his pleasure, protect us.
Yes, as an editor.
Well, sometimes Prabhupada would put some of the purport into the translation. You often find that, actually. And this is one of those many times. And so the idea is that, okay. Was it that in the purport or that in the translation?
The last sentence of the translation.
Oh, okay. All right. My thing is. Yeah. The impersonal Brahman is another of his forms. May he, by his pleasure, protect us. That refers back to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the Brahman.
Right.
So the idea is that that's the whole point of bhakti. In other words, Prabhupada's pointing out in the translation that you may offer these prayers, but you're appealing to the Lord. Please, please mean be pleased with me. Please give me some mercy and protect us, protect our consciousness and so forth. So this is in every prayer that we have. This is kind of understood. In other words, Krishna, you're completely independent. I'm completely dependent on you. So please be pleased with the service that I've tried to do, and give me some more taste for your holy name, or give me the intelligence to perform this service over there. So that's what it means to be surrendered, is to say, well, it's up to you, at your pleasure. It's a way of recognizing the extreme dependence that we have. That's all I can figure.
Srila Prabhupada would do that many, many times, and he even made this point, that the way he did his translations was so people wouldn't get any other idea than bhakti out of his books. So, because sometimes people say, well, the Sanskrit doesn't say that, in that particular verse or whatever. Well, Prabhupada's point was to give that topmost message. The whole purpose of the Bhagavad Gita is to surrender to Krishna. So he wanted to make sure every single page you didn't think it was anything else, because that's really what the whole message is. So that's how he translated things. So we got to get out of the material world. We have to surrender to Krishna. We don't really have time to do other stuff like that. You have a question, Prabhu?
You mentioned, it was talking about always meditating on Krishna. I had a couple of them, actually. The first one, I guess, is the idea of only taking Krishna prasadam, how do you honor it properly and like in the right consciousness and not just like something to, you know, fill your belly, you could say. It's like Prabhupada mentioned, he said, when you drink water, if you don't think Krishna, you're no less than a dog. But if you drink water and you remember Krishna, that's human life. So
Okay.
that was like, sorry.
Well, that's a good start right there. You remember that prasadam is something very, very special. It's tadiyanam, it's non-different from Krishna. There's a few things. One is taking at regulated times. There's a specific time you should take prasadam, your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and to just go out and go snacking. Is that the word? Just snack when you want. That's not good. That's one point right there. To take prasadam in a peaceful atmosphere. Okay. We have our song before we begin, Sarida Vijajo, to meditate in that way, how special prasadam is. And I think it's on an individual basis because everyone takes at different times, you know. So yeah, you have to be careful. These are aids. This will help, you know. And one doesn't look for opulent prasadam. You know what I'm saying? Because that can create problems. In other words, whatever is given and so on, but one doesn't make special arrangements, and that's another advice given too. If you eat too much opulent prasadam, there can be problems. And why are you eating? Why are you taking prasadam? To get the strength and energy for your devotional service. So, if 16 samosas knocks you out and you can't do anything until about 3 in the afternoon, I don't recommend it taking 16 delicious samosas, right? Haribol, Prabhu. So it's your consciousness while you're taking prasadam. You take prasadam, and it's Krishna, just as Krishna has honored this, and also it's my nourishment for my service. That's the main thing. And that's why you take at regulated times, certain amount of time, you just take prasadam, and then you go do your service. Like that. So there's different ideas. I hope that's helpful.
Great. One more real quick. If the super soul's in the heart, how does, they say like the demigods or devatas also like control certain parts of the body? How does that work exactly? Like if that's true.
Well, Krishna's there. Who's controlling the devatas who are controlling things? That's Krishna. That's his arrangement. So they're not independent either. Right? The devatas are completely dependent. Everything in this material world and spiritual world dependent on Krishna, but he's made some kind of an arrangement. It says in the Bhagavad Gita that the demigods are dependent upon Krishna to say, okay, give this person a benediction. When they pray to the devatas, Krishna's got to okay it. It's like, they put a request form on the desk, and then he's got to go, okay. He said, wait on that one. This person does not deserve this at all. Krishna's got to sign off on all these prayers, right? Krishna's got to sign off on them. Even when they're not independent in their ability to give blessings. Okay. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhu. I have two reflections. One, I never thought about this idea of rope, long rope. Like people ask, like people can act independently, which we see like people acting. But this, thank you for saying that idea of rope could be so long that people don't realize how they may feel independent, but actually there is a rope.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that. Another one was the story you said from Vedas about the child going and picking the mud from the below feet.
Yeah, it was a story from YouTube.
Yeah.
I know exactly where.
Who's ever like it's a moral story.
It's a moral story.
Moral story.
Okay.
But does it also mean the question of faith, right? Like child has a faith in that dirt, saying that okay, this is heaven. So the sage took it that way, and other people doesn't have faith. Even maybe heaven doesn't exist. Maybe there is nothing like that can happen in this world. Like in this world, a lot of people don't believe there is God, or even if they believe in God, there is no personal person as a God, right? So, if you could say some reflection.
Well, no, you're right. It's the consciousness. I mean, that's the point, is immediately when you hear that story, you think, oh, someone's got to go to Swargaloka.
Yes.
But there are different heavens, you know, and for that child, heaven was his home and his mom and dad. So he took the earth underneath and brought it. So they're all wondering, how did he get to Swargaloka so fast? But that wasn't heaven for him. Heaven for him, little child, was his mom and dad in the home. Good mom and dad and a peaceful house and all of that. That's heaven for the little child. So.
And one question from, I think I heard this from text number 23. There is a word called living force, and the same it says soul. If you see, does it there? 23 or 24, I don't remember because I don't have a phone.
Okay, living force, okay.
And then later it says soul and super soul. So what is distinction? Like matter, which is like 5 senses and objects of mind, intelligence, ego, and then living force, and then soul.
Well, living force sometimes is the prana, refers to the prana in the body, but also ultimately living force is something spiritual, is bringing everything to life. So that's used interchangeably. Sometimes living force means the prana within the body and so on. But ultimately what's animating that is the living force, the atma, the soul. So just a matter of usage. Yeah. So
Can I make a brief comment?
Okay. Okay. Maitreya Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dharmasetu Prabhu, please accept my obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I really appreciated the point you made about our dependence on Krishna as the super soul to do anything. Srila Prabhupada describes that the soul is floating on 5 types of air within the heart. And we're so tiny that the heart itself is like an unlimited sky to us. So we're just floating there. How can we possibly do anything without help? And the energy, the prana, which is referred to often as the life energy, is imbued with that energy by the super soul. So we're completely dependent in every way. I just very much appreciating that analogy on this day of all days when people are in the type of Maya that celebrates independence from everything. We're celebrating dependence. Thank you for that reminder.
Okay. Yes. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Is it a big day for Sankirtan? Big crowd, everyone's out there. There's a Harinam this evening. What part of town are you going to?
Imperial Beach.
Imperial Beach? Why Imperial Beach? Is there a festival down there?
It's festive. There's a big pier, nice mood, and we have a Krishna Lounge program down there. So
Oh, okay. So it goes right into that?
we're trying to advertise for it.
Okay. Well, Hare Krishna. It's time for prasadam. Are you feeding everyone this morning?
Francisco's making opulent prasadam.
You brought something too, though, right? You brought some prasadam, right?
Yes, I did, but they're not offered though.
Okay. Does it go on the Raj Bhoga? Does it go to the Raj Bhoga? Or?
I put some fruit there for rather than that I don't mean fruit on it, but I actually brought some for you and to take home to your deities.
Okay. Okay. Anyways, is prasadam ready?
Yeah.
Okay. I won't keep anyone any longer. Excuse me. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.